Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for your patience and for joining us on what's a busy weather day across a good part of the central U.S. Fortunately, this presentation will be recorded, so folks who couldn't attend or other folks in your office will be able to view it. Beth Hall from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center is speaking today about the services they provide for us, and this is part of a series of talks where we're having folks from the regional climate centers share what they have. And one of the points of this series of presentations is you don't have to be in the Midwest or a particular region to benefit from the sorts of work that goes on with the regional climate centers. There are a lot of neat projects, and they're all a little bit different, and regardless of where you are, every RCC probably has something of interest to you. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Beth, who is now at Purdue University, to get started on sharing what they have at the MRCC. It's all yours, Beth.
All right, thank you, Ray, and thanks for the opportunity to do this. Aside from some technical difficulties, I'm really excited to have this opportunity to present to everybody some of the tools that we offer through the MRCC, particularly those that I think the National Weather Service, particularly the Weather Forecast Offices use, but I will be introducing even some new ones that I know have been developed over the last few years, in addition to one tool that we've managed to throw together since the center has moved to Purdue. So this is a map showing the location of all the regional climate centers. They really have been around since the early to mid 1980s, and for the most part, they've stayed at the same location, usually university institutes, so all of them except for the Western Regional Climate Center at a major university. This is a 5-year contract through NOAA, through NCEI, that goes up for bid. And it went up for bid last year, and it was a fairly rare occurrence because the Midwestern Regional Climate Center was bid upon, and so was the Southern Regional Climate Center. And both of those centers, the new applicant, if you will, won. So the Southern Regional Climate Center moved from Louisiana State University. It's now at Texas A&M, and the Midwestern Regional Climate Center used to be at University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois, and is now at Purdue University. But regardless, all of the RCCs have a similar mission, same with the MRCC. So this is where we really focus on data. How can we make that data available in a format that people can use to make decisions, can get answers, can monitor local conditions? We do work with the data to do some applied research and investigate climate-related issues, but those are usually efforts where we have leveraged the RCC as a whole. So the RCCs typically are more data-oriented, service-oriented, trying to develop tools online. And then because of the capacity that's involved, the human capacity that's involved with that, whether it be programmers and climate scientists, we take that expertise and try and do additional research. When Ray approached me about presenting to you all, he asked me to focus primarily on the frost freeze program that the MRCC offers. And this has been a way done for a while, but some of you may be new, and there have been some new products since this was probably first presented to many of the offices years ago. So what was the motivation behind this? Well, the 2007 spring freeze, and this was actually before my time with Midwestern Regional Climate Center, but it came through in early April, so somewhat later than normal, though not later necessarily these days. It caused a tremendous amount of damage across the region. This was particularly late in the season for the southern U.S., but it had impacts across the Midwest and the Central Weather Service region. And it also followed a very warm March, I think, and that's what tripped everybody up. Is the March was warm, so I think people were thinking we're done with winter, we're done with having to issue any sort of alerts, and maybe there were calendar dates that said on average we are done issuing our freeze watches, warnings, advisories, and so forth. But then we had this event come through, and that caused people to start to reevaluate. Are calendar dates really the best thing we should be using when issuing these things, or should we be looking at climatology a bit more? 2009 showed almost an opposite situation where it wasn't in the spring, it was the fall that had the impact. I see typos in my talk here as I'm going along, but we had a very wet, delayed planting season, much like we just had a couple years ago in 2019. The summer started off relatively cool, so this meant that the crops didn't mature very quickly, and we were trying to get them to go to maturity, to dry out in time for harvest, which pushed that crop a little bit later into the fall season, making it susceptible to freeze damage. So again, if we were looking at calendar dates, the problem was is people might have said, oh, we've hit October 1st, we don't have to worry about issuing headlines anymore because according to that calendar date, everything should be dead, where in reality, not everything was dead, and alerts could have minimized some damage. So I was approached in 2012, maybe even 2013, by several different Weather Service offices saying, you know, we need a way to coordinate across offices a little bit better. I mean, we can be on the phone, say, with our different offices, but if it's an office that borders maybe 5 other offices, this could be a lot of time on the phone. So they were looking to see if there was some online tool that could be used where people could post what they're thinking in terms of whether they were still in a season where advisories could be warranted should the weather move in that direction. But they also were asking if there could be more environmental monitoring tools that they could consider, and maybe if there could be some input from vegetation experts, maybe state climatologists, so extension experts, maybe some soil experts. So it wasn't just the forecasters kind of working in a vacuum. They had more of a partnership going on. Out of that 2007 freeze event, a report was written to try and say what worked, what didn't work. And in general, the Weather Service did a good job communicating that a freeze event was going to happen. So there was some heads up, some communication about it. So there really weren't any major disasters that came out of that from a forecaster's point of view. However, they did quickly recognize that the base freeze warnings or headlines that could have caused impacts should be looking more at climatological events, but also environmental, current surrounding conditions, as opposed to just saying, well, the average date when we hit a certain threshold is this, so that's when we're going to turn that off. They wanted to get away from these calendar dates. And they also wanted to get away from just thinking about agriculture, such as, well, has anybody even planted their field yet? Or have the fields been harvested? They recommended looking at other industries that were financially impacted by the freeze, such as horticulture, nurseries, even home gardens, home gardeners, if they were trying to put out tomatoes, or in the fall, their mums and so forth. So to think broader as opposed to just what are farmers doing. They also recommended in the report that better relationships need to be fostered with university extension, state climatologists, USDA people, and other partners to have more of a discussion about, hey, is this going to have an impact? We see that in the forecast that a freeze event is likely. What are the impacts across all of your communities, and how can we better convey that to the public? For the MRCC, hearing all of the needs from the Weather Service, this really came across as being perfect for a regional climate center to do. First of all, the MRCC is not sector specific, so we could take what the Weather Service needs and perhaps bridge with these other partners, such as state climatologists, university extension. The MRCC also is in the business, if you will, of monitoring and assessing current climate conditions and their impact. So while we rarely, if ever, are looking at forecasts, we have the capability to see, well, how many growing degree days have accumulated? How many days has it been since the last hard freeze? we can look at the data that's out there and see if there are ways that we can present this so that forecasters can assess more holistically what are the risks involved and should we be continuing to issue any sort of headlines or alerts. Since we're in the business of the climate data and tools, anytime the Weather Service were to say, hey, we really could benefit from having a tool that does X, Y, and Z, we have the personnel capacity, human capacity with the programmers on staff and the climate scientists on staff to actually develop these tools and to promote these tools. And I think one of the important things is the MRCC could serve as a neutral party between the partners. It wasn't like this was going to be one Weather Service office that was going to be taking the lead and telling the other offices, hey, this is what we're going to do. But we also were a neutral party with everyone else involved, whether the state climatologist, extension, or even regional headquarters. We could say, hey, we really don't have too much skin in the game here, but we can try and help bring the communication and coordination better. So we were really hoping from all this that this would be a one-stop shop where people, not just forecasters, but communities can go and see what is the status and risk should a freeze event come through. The idea is we would develop products and tools that utilize daily data, so your maximum temperature, possibly precipitation. Though quickly people were saying, well, but in terms of vegetation, it wasn't so much if the daytime minimum temperature hit below 32 or even 28 degrees Fahrenheit. It's how long those freezing temperatures lasted in a 24-hour period. And so then we had to bring in hourly data. Specialty crop growers were saying, hey, if you're going to do that, we could use stuff like chilling hour accumulation. So we were realizing that there were some opportunities to look at hourly data. I have next, the third bullet, asterisk, the incorporation of hourly forecasts. So if we could pull in, say, the NDSD from the National Weather Service, in addition to what the climatology was saying, perhaps this could highlight areas of risk where we could say, hey, we know that we still have vegetation going in this area. That vegetation would be severely damaged under those forecasts. So this could be an opportunity, though I have it asterisk because we never got to that, which is a good time to point out that there was never any dedicated additional funding for anything that I'm about to show you. This is all just, we were excited to be involved with it as an MRCC, and it was part of our contract funds. But there was nothing in the contract that specified this particular project. So we would totally work on it when we could and then got pulled off on other projects. The other goal that we had from this Frost Freeze project was reporting, sort of along the lines of storm reports, drought monitor reports. There could be reports on freeze damage. So this could be utilized for, say, event reports, such as what came out of that 2007 Easter freeze report that the Weather Service led, but we would also have a better idea of, wow, this freeze event came through and we're seeing damage in this and that and here and there, that perhaps that means there is still risk going on, or maybe the damage was so extensive that there's nothing left that can be damaged. I have that asterisk because even though we incorporated ways to report damage and impacts, it sort of has fallen off the radar, if you will, where it hasn't been pushed hard by the MRCC in past years, and so it really hasn't been utilized. So both of those, the incorporating hourly forecasts and reporting, could still be on our wish list that we can look at if that is something that seems to be of value to the Weather Service. So while there's many products that we are developing and updating on a daily basis, some on an hourly basis, the next thing I want to show you is, so what is this way that the Weather Service Office has an active role in providing input? So this is a map, I would say national, but we don't have Hawaii and Alaska on here. But when Weather Service offices and others, the State Climatologist Extension, want to go in and submit a report, they are essentially stating whether they have assessed in their domain, their area of responsibility, if they believe that there's still vegetation that would be susceptible to freezing temperatures, if it's sort of mixed, like maybe in the spring some stuff has come up that would be at risk and others haven't, or if we've reached a point where vegetation is not really susceptible. The date on this particular map was just yesterday, actually. So you can see most of the region is a gray, and there are faded grays, faded colors, and dark colors. So you can see over in the western Colorado, eastern Utah area, that's a darker gray. And what that means is that recommendation was submitted within the last 60 days. Everything else that has more of a pale pastel shade to it is more than 60 days old. This project actually was just started for the Midwest states primarily, so that's a 9-state region, but then interest spread across the central region of the National Weather Service, and then other regions you can see also were expressing interest. So Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi, they were all saying, hey, we want to be a part of this too because freezes impact us. So there has been some spread into other Weather Service regions, and you can see we've set this up so across all 48 states there can be communication that takes place. From those national maps, users can click to zoom in a bit closer to get some more detail. Unfortunately, because I did grab these fairly recently and the region's been in this, there's no vegetation that's susceptible because we're in our predominantly dormant season for that type of vegetation. It's all gray, but we added in the feature of this different level of stippling so you can see, well, how old was that recommendation? Because we were finding originally years ago that people would submit a report, but it might be more than a year old. So we wanted to add some sort of feature so people could see, well, how recent was that recommendation that vegetation is now susceptible or mixed or not susceptible at all. So where can you find this? On our main page, and again, the main website is mrcc.purdue.edu. Under that top banner bar, there's a bunch of pull downs. You can probably find VIP there, though I've highlighted with a red circle where on the main page you can just click on VIP and that will get you to a lot of these tools. I will say though that since the MRCC has moved to Purdue, we're trying to do a whole new look, whole new branding of everything. So we hope to launch a different looking website later this spring, early summer. But for now, this is what it would look like if you go there and where you can click to get more information. So if you clicked on the VIP page, you would get to kind of a main VIP looking design. But if you click under frost freeze guidance, this is for the Weather Service people, there will be an option to fill out the guidance forms or an impact report. So you do have to register so that you can log in and do this. You can see that I've put in my email address and my password. If you're new to this whole system, just click on the registration page. I believe it's pretty much immediate. So you kind of put in, well, what's your name, email, password, but then also what is your affiliation? We want to know, are you with the Weather Service? Are you at State Climate Office? Which Weather Service, which State Climate Office? And I'll explain why that sort of detail matters in a future slide. So once you log in, then you are asked, okay, so do you want to look at old reports, which are kind of down the bottom half, like do you want to see reports from different counties by state, crop reporting district, or no, do you want to see the guidance reports or freeze impact report? But if you're trying to submit a form, that's in the bottom half, those bottom 3 bullets. And you can request, well, do you want to do this by state, reporting district, or warning area? I think for the next slide I'm about to show, I had selected counties by the National Weather Service county warning area, and then a pop-up menu came from there, and I selected the Indianapolis county warning area. So then that took me to this screen. The leftish column is where the user would select what their recommendation is, and we can have 20 different people. We can have many different people submit the same recommendation or recommendations for the same counties. And that's really important because then you can see, well, this is what the Weather Service thinks, but this is maybe what the state climatologist thinks, and maybe this is what the extension person sees, so that you can see the whole variety of recommendations for a particular county. But usually before you put in your recommendation, you might think, well, some counties apply for some things and others for another. So that second column is where you can check off which counties you want to submit your opinions to, your recommendations to, or that third button in the second column that has the blue text says open interactive map, or you can just click anywhere on that map and that will take you to a GIS interface. And you can see, because it's GIS, you can draw squares, you can draw polygons, so that way you can highlight which counties you're wanting to submit your recommendations for. It doesn't have to be for the whole area. Once you've highlighted your counties of interest, you can click done on this page, and it will take you back and it will show you, okay, these are the ones you clicked, or you can just go through and click them. So on this example, I said, well, I not only have my county selected, but going to the far left, I turned on, I said mixed susceptibility. And then in the text box below that, I put in my rationale. I said, well, some mums and other seasonally vulnerable vegetation are still around that would be damaged. Then I think below this, if I scroll down, but I didn't want my screen capture to be really small, you can say this is who you're reporting for and your sector and so forth. But within a couple minutes of submitting that report, the map will then be updated so that you can see your report, you can compare it with what other people around you are saying. And so that solves the problem of how do we communicate with multiple weather forecast offices without us being on the phone all day with each different office. We can do this and then see what other people are thinking and why. So remember I said when you register, we want you to say, well, who are you with? Like Weather Service, which office? Are you with the state climate office and so forth? Because a listserv is created. And when you register, your name is added to that listserv. And what's nice is anytime you submit a report, originally, years ago when we developed this, everybody on the listserv would get that report that you just submitted, because maybe not everyone's looking at the map every 5 minutes throughout the day. And it seemed a little bit more effective to just automatically generate an email and send it, but only to the people in the neighboring locations. So for example, if somebody from the Indianapolis office were to submit a report, they would get that report in their email, but so would people in the adjacent offices, such as the Chicago Romeo office, the Purdue office, Northern Indiana, and so on and so forth, so that they are notified, hey, Indianapolis just submitted this. The state climatologist would get that report. Relevant extension people who were in those counties would also get the reports. And then the flip would be true. So if I, as the Indiana State Climatologist, wanted to submit a report, then essentially every weather forecast office that was and had any sort of coverage in Indiana would see my report. So it's really useful that those listservs are there and that when people register, they say it. We need to expand further. And again, this is one of those that sort of fell off the radar with MRCC in terms of priorities, but we would always love to see master gardeners perhaps get involved with this so they can post their thoughts. USDA personnel, if they can post their recommendations of, hey, there's a lot of vegetation that would be harmed, or there's not really anymore. So this is sort of that we need to revitalize it somehow. And how's the best way to get more people than just Weather Service offices posting their reports? So that's the whole section of VIP that is associated with really Weather Service office. Now I'm going to go through several of the products that we just generate every day that people can go to the website and see for a quick look. So this is an example of climatological maps. So if you're just curious, climatologically speaking, what is the earliest we've ever had a 32-degree freeze, the latest we've ever had, the first one or the last one, depending upon if we're talking fall or spring. And these have been updated for our new 30-year normals. So that first map on the left is showing the median date of the last 32-degree freeze, and this is really for the springtime. The map on the right, I pulled for a fall example of the climatological date of the latest first 32-degree freeze. So people can see, wow, we've, across maybe the southern central Weather Service region, we've seen that first 32-degree freeze happen as late as in November. So we might need to still be paying attention to the environment before we decide to turn off our advisory program for the season. The previous slide was showing graphics shaded, and some people like those. You might think, well, that is the funkiest contour shading I've ever seen. The reason is it's using a shading routine called the Thiessen polygon, which takes the station location and shades it to that value, to the halfway point of the next station. And the reason for that is we're talking about dates here, and you can't really do smooth contour shading for dates because dates are not like temperature that are fairly continuous in nature. So from some people say, well, then we should just do dots. So you can totally turn the shading off and just look at dots for these products. Also, you see I have zoomed in a little closer. We can also have it so you could just zoom into a particular state and see what's going on, as opposed to always having to look so far out at that national view. We also have, those are more climatological products that I was showing. We have those that are updated daily, such as for the current year, what was the date of the most recent 28-degree freeze? And again, because I pulled this yesterday, that was like 0 days ago because it's been fairly cold across the country. Here's an example that shows number of days with a minimum temperature greater than 28 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 14 days. This is pulled from way back in 2013, but just I wanted to show a more colorful example. We also have some that are just growing degree related. So the accumulated growing degree days since the most recent 32-degree freeze or since the most recent 28-degree freeze. I think we also have dates in there, like if you want accumulated since April 1st. And that way you can get an idea of, well, has enough growing degree days even accumulated that we can reasonably assume that vegetation will have developed out of the ground and would be susceptible. This is an interesting case of products that illustrate how feedback from end users really helps steer us. So we had one that talked about what was the lowest minimum temperature experienced so far for this winter season. But you can see that this isn't really telling a big story because most of the country, certainly most of the central region, says, well, the lowest minimum temperature has been below 10 degrees. Well, we had a researcher out of Ohio that looks at grape plants, and they said, well, grape plants can be severely harmed if the lowest minimum temperature gets below, say, minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So we also provide this product that takes it into a little bit more detail so users can see, well, how cold has it gotten so far? In this particular map I just pulled yesterday, but again, with all of these maps, users can click on a particular location and that will zoom them in a bit closer. In addition to those static maps, we do provide GIS versions of all of those maps, which certainly are nice because that means you can zoom in and zoom out. You can see with the legend, or not the legend, the navigation panel here on the left, you can show two different parameters at the same time. You can show impacts reports overlaid with days from the most recent freeze. In the next section, we do have some National Phenology Network products. So they will show the date of the first leafing on different stages in there. So that could be a useful way to see the state of the vegetation. We have growing degree day products, the different climatologies. So I think with this particular one, we still have to update to the 90, 91, well, the recent normals. Double check that one. But in this case, I wanted to show another product, that's the very last one, that is freeze probabilities. So you can look at the probability of a freeze occurring on a particular date or before a particular date or even after a particular date. Your temperature choices, and in the top left of that little screenshot, you see it shows 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I think the other option is 28. But the user can decide if they want just a normal freeze or a hard freeze. Are they looking for the probability of a freeze occurring on or before or after a date, and then they get to choose the date. If they click on a particular station, in this case I clicked on Rochester, it will have a pop-up menu, a pop-up table that will even summarize what all of those informations are. So if you're curious about a particular station. You can also go into Climate. So this is our online data portal. And for a particular station, you can look at these probability curves. The one in the top left is showing probability of a later freeze in spring. And then the one on the right is for, we also have that for the fall. And then we have one for the growing season as well, which is what's shown on the right. Essentially, each curve that's a different color is your temperature of interest. If you're into a hard freeze, you can pick the green color. You can say, oh, I really want to plant my tomatoes by April 1st. So I'm now looking at the top left graph. And if I look at April 1st, go along until I hit the green curve, that's pretty much saying, well, there's climatologically speaking, still a 60% chance of a hard freeze occurring after that. So I can take that risk information on myself. On the right, we can see, again, the probability of the number of days that is frost free. So between the first and the last dates of a particular temperature. And then you can also download this information in tabular format. But again, this is on Climate. But since I was talking about probabilities, I wanted to let everyone know that this information was available too. But going back to the VIP tools, in terms of hourly tools, people, I think I said earlier in the talk that they're very interested in knowing, well, not so much how cold did it get, but how long was it sustained at that particular temperature. Here we just have it at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see that users can click on, well, how many hours, consecutive hours over the last 24 hours, or what was the longest consecutive hour period over the last 7 days or last 30 days. And so it will change on the map. The legend will say, well, how many consecutive hours that was. They can click to see what the 24-hour chart looks like, and then it will pop up for that particular station and give them an idea of when and where and how intense that duration period was. And any of these maps for the GIS tools, users can actually download in a nice layout so that they can put it in a presentation or poster if they want to. So we had all those frost freeze tools that I just got done telling you about. Eventually, that evolved into VIP. That what I've been mentioning a lot, the logo for VIPs in the top left, which stands for the Vegetation Impact Program, because as people were seeing the different products we were putting together that were related to frost freeze issues, they said, hey, there's a lot more out there that can utilize the same climate information, such as stress degree day, heat stress in the summer. I mean, we're still working with the same parameters, so can we build a tool that monitors that? Accumulated chilling hours are important for perennial specialty crops over the dormant season. And Keach Byram Drought Index is a very fast-moving, fast-responding drought index. And so that led us really to the Vegetation Impact Program, which says we're going to take everything that we did for the frost freeze tools, that suite of tools, but and that is still very vegetation motivated. Remember, we wanted to know when we were going to issue these advisories or alerts based on if vegetation was present or not. But then we wanted to add in these different products. This also allowed us to expand our partnerships. Perhaps if these tools, the VIP tools, are more relevant to other sectors, they might feel more engaged to enter impacts over the frost-free season. And there was interest to even include mesonet data so that we could look at disease risk, pests, bring in more higher resolution data. However, I will say that including the mesonets is still on the wish list, and we hope to pursue funding in the future so that we can do that. So what are some of these other VIP products? I mentioned the stress degree days. Essentially, it's a similar concept to growing degree days, but it utilizes a base of 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So it counts what was the high temperature for that day. Let's say the high temperature was 90 degrees. Then we simply subtract 86 from 90, and then that would accumulate 4 units, 4 stress degree day units. And this is a modified formula for it. There are certainly more intense formulas. And if we look at this particular map that was pulled last summer, if you're like me, you're like, okay, I see a lot of green. I don't know what that means. For all these products, we put it in climatological perspective. So how does this compare to normal? And we can see that as of last year, since we see the pale green a lot, this is pretty close to normal. Now in the Dakotas and Minnesota, they were facing a good drought and so strong heat. So they were experiencing a bit more stress than what was normal. Chilling hour departures, that one is saying over the dormant season, they want to know how many hours fell between a sweet range of temperatures, like 35 degrees Fahrenheit, 43, because perennial plants seem to thrive during the dormant season in their own little sleepy way in those temperature ranges. So this is showing a departure map, but again, users can look at the actual accumulation, which can provide guidance on how good the yield is going to be the next year, both in terms of quantity and quality. I chose this screenshot again to highlight that users can click and zoom in closer to their area of interest. They're not always limited to just the national view. And then the last one here is the Keach-Byram Drought Index. Again, the one on the left just shows what is the current status of the Keach-Byram Drought Index, and then it puts it into climatological perspective. So that's everything that I wanted to share with you about the VIP program. In the next few minutes, I just wanted to go through some other tools. I know I want to end a little bit early, so if there's any questions. But this next one is the Regional Mesonet Program. Quite a few states run their own mesonets, and I know the Weather Service has access to that mesonet data through MADIS and the National Mesonet Program. What the MRCC wants to do is, though, to provide more regional scale maps for a broad range of users. This particular map highlights black diamonds are where mesonets are, red dots are rod stations, and it's showing potential evapotranspiration. I will say that since the transition from University of Illinois to Purdue, we have struggled to get some of the products up and running again. So yes, Illinois and Indiana have mesonet stations for this. So does Michigan. We just have not prioritized at this point getting that in there. But keep an eye out for this, particularly in the growing season, because we will have this including these other mesonet data sets. Another product that comes out of the Regional Mesonet Program with the MRCC is looking at soil temperatures. This is important because that 4-inch soil temperature, when it's sustained at 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the spring, it's a guide for when to start treating the soils and plants. In the fall, it's a guide for also when to apply nutrients, perhaps going into the dormant season. So if forecasters can monitor this, be aware of it, maybe see connections between forecasts and also what the soil temperatures are saying, they can perhaps provide more tailored services to the agricultural community if that's of interest. Where can you find that stuff? Under the Midwest Climate tab. For the moment, you can see more information on our Mesonet program. Climatologies that we've developed over time. So here's a heat index climatology. For all of the climatologies, we do provide these in GIS format, so that allows you to zoom in and move around and turn on and off layers, and probability curves to know, well, what's the probability of me climatologically speaking. There, for this one, are 3 different products. You can look at the average number of days with a heat index over a certain threshold, times when we have a run of days with 3 or more, hours that hit that heat index, and then the average number of hours, and then the different thresholds. So users, when they come to this page, can mouse over those different options or click over the different options, and the map would change on the fly. Or again, the GIS tool will allow people to kind of select what features they want with this. Similar to the heat index climatology, and maybe more appropriate for this time of year, we have the wind chill climatology. You can see the different options there. They're very similar to the heat index climatology, but we do have a much broader range of temperature thresholds that users can click on to see, well, what is the climatology? How unusual is it if we have a wind chill of -30? Snow climatology, again, may be relevant for this time of year, depending upon where you're located. You can see the dot map essentially, but if you look over to the left, the different options, you can look at this either as snowfall or snow depth. You can look at these maps based on the average or the maximum. You can look at runs, because it always drives me crazy. If you just looked at a one-day snowfall, that's not the same as a snow event that might have gone on for 2 or 3 days. You can look at different thresholds of amounts of snowfall, and then also, and you can look at the whole season, or if you want to look at a particular month to see, well, is this highly unusual for this particular month? There's also a GIS interface for the snowfall. You can see at the top left, there's different tabs. So you can do the snowfall tab or the snow depth tab. There's also the data export. So if you actually want to pull out the particular data that you selected from those options, you can. We're also in the process of developing a new snow climatology tool because we started realizing, wow, there's so much that we offer through the MRCC related to snow, but you have to go in, say, 5 different locations to get it. So why don't we just combine a lot of these tools into one major tool so that it's more of a toolbox, and users can then click on whatever particular information they want at the top. They can scroll back and forth. The map will change on the fly. This is using that Tableau technology that some of you may have heard of that has a much friendlier user interface. So on the far right, you can see that users can see, oh, I just want to go back to 1990, or maybe I want to go all the way back to 1940. They can also now type in the snowfall threshold amount as opposed to be limited to the fixed amounts that we had chosen. And then the last thing I wanted to let folks know about, if you aren't already, that we do provide on the MRCC website is the Accumulated Winter Season Severity Index. This was developed by Steve Hilberg and Barb May-Falstad several years ago that wanted to try to characterize a season by both temperature and snowfall and snow depth, and with a combination of those parameters, assign like values, numbers to them, and accumulate it throughout the season so that we can kind of compare how this season is by those integrated parameters to past seasons. So this is just a snippet that I grabbed essentially at the end of last winter season. So you can see, oh, well, where did we have kind of a mild winter last year versus a severe winter? And then when users click on a particular location, they can see the running pattern of what's going on throughout the year. So if you were to go now, the maps are being updated and the charts, the black line shows where we are at currently. Again, I pulled this at this particular thing at the end of last season, but it will also show you the range throughout the years of interest of where it was defined as severe, extreme, moderate, etc. You can find that via the AUSSI, the Accumulated Winter Season Severity Index, under the Research tab. So with that, I'm going to end there and see if there's anybody that has any questions or anything that I can help with. Hand it back to Ray.
I'll check the chat box. If you guys have any questions, please check them there or type them there.
Yep, and I'd like to thank Beth for presenting and sharing all those tools. The neat thing about the sort of projects the RCC tools is they can really help us enhance or refine our messaging or grab data that perhaps, like looking at the heat index climatology, that can help us message what our risk is going into events or going into seasons. And there are all sorts of endless manners to utilize climatological data and the tools we've seen to help refine messaging. And do we have any questions yet, Jenna?
No, not yet. Oh, one just came in. As far as Mesonet data is concerned, would SD data from SDSU or South Dakota data from SDSU be included in this?
We hope to. I have a relationship, if you will, with Nathan Edwards, who manages it, and I understand there's concerns with all Mesonets that they're just barely hanging on financially. So they're very hesitant to just let data be distributed for free because that's undercutting their financial stream. However, they are part of MADIS and the National Mesonet Program, and so with the MRCC and being a contract with NOAA, we also have access to MADIS. So my hope is we will update our Regional Mesonet Program tools by pulling data directly from MADIS and putting it into those map formats. What we were doing before and why we've hit a snag currently is we would just reach out to the individual Mesonets and come up with some individual way to distribute the data. And so once it transferred to Purdue, it kind of seemed chaotic. And I said, well, why aren't we just pulling this from MADIS like everyone else does? I'm hoping that South Dakota will be supportive of this because those maps are not providing the raw data. It is just providing that graphical view of what their data is providing. So in my humble opinion, we are not undercutting their financial stream. If anything, we're promoting that they have a great resource there in South Dakota from their Mesonet. And if people are interested in getting more specific data, they can reach out to them, but we can provide more of that regional picture through the maps. So yeah, that was a long answer for yes. We hope to include South Dakota Mesonet data in our product.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions at the time, but I actually had a quick question. If you could go, I don't know if you can go back a few slides, but that new snow tool that you had, is that available right now, or is it just in development mode?
That is a great question. So we do not have it linked from our website, but we do have a URL for it. And I believe our plan is to send out an email to all the climate focal points across the central region, inviting them to essentially be beta testers of it, because we really, before we make this open to the public, we want to get feedback first. So I can't remember the time frame. Obviously, it's snowy now, but we probably will be asking for feedback in the next month or two, and realizing that then we'll have the whole summer to do this. But if people are really dying to have access to this tool and give feedback right now, please email me, or certainly Ray or Jenna can get a hold of me. My email is just bethhall@purdue.edu, and I'd be happy to send you the URL with the understanding that this is still kind of a beta phase for evaluation.
Okay, yeah, it looked very interesting, and so I was wondering if we could check it out. But okay, yeah. So if anyone would like to check that out, just email Beth. I don't see any other questions. Ray, did you have any other final comments or other questions?
Maybe one last question. Beth, do you have any projects in the pipeline coming down or that are being discussed that might be of interest to Weather Service folks?
That's a good question. We have some product ideas that we're going to seek funding for. We currently have two products, though, or projects that is one thing funded by NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, and that is actually to develop a flash drought risk tool that pulls in forecast data and looks at, we've developed a machine learning algorithm based on climatological data of when flash droughts have occurred. And so I can't remember, it might be the GFS model. We wanted to go out as far out as we could, so go out 14 days so that we could, through this tool, provide guidance, probabilistic guidance. Like there's a 60% chance of a flash drought developing or a 20% chance. So that's pretty exciting. We do hope to launch that in testing mode for this growing season. And so if anyone wants to be on the beta tester list, like I said, all climate focal points will be on that list, so that we can see if this is working for folks, if they like the colors, if it's just not useful. The other one is we have funding through the USDA Midwest Climate Hub, who wanted to have a tool that looked at the climatology of the trend, essentially the trend climatology of the first and last freezes of the season. The thought being that with climate change, we are seeing that first hard freeze occurring later and later in the fall, and what impact could that have for growers? So it's sort of an add-on to our frost freeze tools that we currently provide for the VIP page, but we're going to try and present it very much in this Tableau world, like what you see on the screen for the snow climatology, where users can almost click in between the different products, but they can see, well, so is it now 3 days later on average than it was, say, 30, 50 years ago, or has there really not been that much of a change? And again, that would apply to the last hard freeze in the spring and the first hard freeze in the fall. So we're pretty excited about that one.
So neat stuff. Any other questions pop up, Jenna?
Yeah, actually, well, a suggestion came in, use the GFS ensemble mean for the flash drought tool. And that came in from Victor Murphy.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's the one that we have, but I will double check with Jonathan.
And he says, incredible product, sorely needed. And yeah, we're definitely interested in that too. I'm not sure if you're working with or have notified Maggie Hurwitz of that, but she's kind of all in the area of flash drought right now. So I'll make sure to pass along this information to her, maybe to reach out to you. She's our head
climatologist. I think she is very aware of it because she's affiliated with NIDIS in some ways. And so I think she's aware of all the different flash drought research that's going on.
Right.
That's certainly a reminder for us.
Great. I don't see any other questions that have come in. Thank you so much, Beth, for coming in and sharing what you guys at the Midwestern Regional Climate Center have the latest and greatest. And Ray, do you have any final comments to end us
No,
out?
thanks to Beth, and thanks for folks for taking some time out of a busy weather day to participate. Hopefully this will help you out in your office.
Yeah, and we will be, this session has been recorded, and as soon as Jim is able to process it and get it online, we will share it with through the listserv. So thank you guys. Thank you, Beth, and have a great day. I'll end the webinar now.